Michael and Sarah purchased their Victorian mansion at a suspiciously low price, never questioning why their elderly neighbor watched them with such unease. During renovation, a hollow sound behind the kitchen wall revealed something the previous owner had desperately tried to conceal. When they finally cracked open the hidden safe, a single key opened closed chapters buried by the previous owner. The Victorian mansion stood tall against the afternoon sky, its vintage charm masking decades of hidden history. Michael and Sarah had fallen in love with it instantly. The price tag seemed suspiciously low for such a magnificent property, but the young couple, blinded by excitement and dreams of their future together, never questioned their good fortune. Their elderly neighbor, Mr. Harrison, lived in the modest house next door. Whenever Michael and Sarah spotted him tending to his garden, they would wave cheerfully. Yet the old man always averted his gaze, his shoulders tensing visibly before he retreated indoors. Sarah often wondered why he seemed so uncomfortable around them. The first few weeks in their new home passed in a blur of paint samples and furniture deliveries. One evening, while measuring the rooms for new cabinets, he frowned at his notepad. Something was off about the dimensions. The kitchen wall seemed to take up more space than it should, creating a discrepancy between the kitchen and the adjacent dining room. Sarah joined him, running her hand along the wall in question. On a hunch, she knocked against it, hearing a distinct hollow sound that differed from the solid thud of the surrounding sections. The couple exchanged curious glances. This wasn't just a wall, something lay hidden behind it. Armed with a hammer and boundless curiosity, Michael carefully broke through the drywall. Dust filled the air as a section crumbled away, revealing the unmistakable outline of a metal safe embedded in the wall. It was about the size of a microwave, with a combination dial lock that had clearly not been touched in years. What could be inside the safe? Gold coins, family heirlooms, or perhaps something more sinister? For the next several days, they took turns rotating the dial. They combined different numbers and famous historical dates. Nothing worked. The safe remained stubbornly closed, guarding its secrets. One afternoon, while struggling with a stuck kitchen pipe, Michael suggested they ask their neighbor if they could borrow some tools. Perhaps Mr. Harrison, having lived next door for so long, might even know something about the previous owners. They crossed the yard to the small house where Mr. Harrison lived alone. When he answered the door, his expression remained guarded until Michael mentioned the reason for their visit. The moment the words "hidden safe" left his lips, the old man's face drained of all color. His hands began to tremble visibly, and he gripped the doorframe for support. He warned them to leave it alone, his voice barely audible, like a ghost of a whisper. Without another explanation, he shut the door, leaving the bewildered couple standing on his porch. His reaction only intensified their curiosity. What could possibly be inside that safe? Unable to crack the combination, they decided more drastic measures were needed. They brought an electric cutting tool. As the metal began to screech under the blade, movement caught Sarah's eye. Mr. Harrison stood at the fence line, watching them with haunted eyes. His face showed conflict, as though witnessing something deeply painful. Then something in his demeanor changed, a resignation washing over him. He called out numbers across the yard, 4927, before turning away. Sarah rushed to the safe, spinning the dial to each number in sequence. The mechanism clicked, and the door swung open with surprising ease. After all their anticipation, the contents seemed oddly disappointing. Inside lay only a sepia-toned photograph showing a stern-looking man standing stiffly behind a seated woman whose eyes were cast downward. Beneath it sat a single brass key, small and ornate. No treasure, no documents, just these two mysterious items. Michael and Sarah looked at each other, puzzled by the anticlimactic revelation. Why hide these ordinary items so securely? And how did Mr. Harrison know the combination? Why that cryptic warning when they told him about the safe at first? There was clearly more to this story than met the eye. They walked over to his house carrying the photograph and key. This time when he answered, he invited them inside with a resigned sigh, as though accepting that some long-postponed reckoning had finally arrived. Mr. Harrison revealed that he had grown up in their house. The people in the photograph were his estranged aunt and late uncle, who had raised him there. After his parents died in an accident, he was sent to live with them. His voice grew strained as he spoke about his childhood. explaining how he had sold the house years ago to escape the memories but couldn't bear to move far away. His aunt, he continued, had been a wicked and unstable woman who abandoned him when he was just 11 years old. She had forbidden him from entering the basement during the 3 years they lived together. Often he would hear her wailing at night, sounds that terrified him as a child. When he asked his uncle, he simply told him she was fighting her demons and to ignore her. Michael interrupted, confusion evident in his voice. He pointed out that their house didn't have a basement, according to the floor plans or any visible access points. Mr. Harrison's face darkened as he admitted that he had sealed it himself before selling the property all those years ago, wanting to bury the past along with the space. The key they had found was the only remaining access. After much gentle persuasion, Mr. Harrison agreed to return to the house with them. In the kitchen, his fingers moved across the wooden floor with precision born of memory. He pulled back a rug in the corner, revealing a trap door that had been painted to match the surrounding floor perfectly, its outline barely visible even when exposed. As he inserted the brass key into the lock, tears began streaming down his weathered face. He whispered that he had avoided this moment for 20 years, never finding the courage to confront what lay below. The trap door opened with a groan of neglected hinges, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The basement was surprisingly empty save for a single wooden chest sitting in the center of the room. Inside the chest, they found neatly folded dresses with disturbing brownish stains, medical supplies including bandages, her blood-stained dresses and towels, antiseptics, jewelry that even to their untrained eyes appeared to be worth a fortune, and beneath it all, a leather-bound journal. Mr. Harrison picked up the journal with trembling fingers, looking as though he might collapse at any moment. He opened it carefully, the pages crackling with age. As he began to read aloud, his voice broke repeatedly. The journal contained the agonizing account of the abuse his aunt had suffered at his uncle's hands. The basement had not been her prison but her sanctuary, the only place she could cry without frightening her young nephew. She had documented brutal beatings that had caused her to miscarry twice. The final entry described the night she poisoned her husband's dinner after a particularly violent attack. She had fled to Portugal afterward, leaving her location in the journal in the desperate hope that her nephew would find her someday. Mr. Harrison broke down completely, decades of misplaced hatred dissolving into grief. All those years, he had believed his aunt had abandoned him, that she was the monster in their household. In reality, she had been protecting both herself and her nephew from a truth too terrible for a child to comprehend. As they emerged from the basement, blinking in the sunlight that now seemed too bright, too normal for the darkness they had uncovered, Mr. Harrison reflected that some walls don't just hide rooms, they hide truths we're too afraid to face. Have you ever wondered what secrets the walls of your home might be keeping? What hidden histories might be sealed behind plaster and paint, waiting for someone curious enough to discover them?